nobody's going to come and change your circumstances for you. And so you must organize yourself to be able to respond to your issues. So some of the things you do may be political because, unfortunately, some of the issues we deal with are political in nature.
Great. So, good morning. Actually, I'm honored that you are with me, and actually even brought someone with you. So, for Farouk, my name is Debbie Jean-Jacques, and I am the founder of Centre NGO. The purpose of this webinar is a lesson learned from the West African Society. Civil society institutions, insights from civil society organizations, and with a long history of helping civil societies in West Africa increase their effectiveness. You could say WACSI, I can never say that word properly, is a reliable resource for the field. During this time, WACSI has gained significant insights into the difficulties and possibilities affecting civil societies in the region, as well as methods for tackling these challenges. So in this webinar, we hope to explore how lessons learned and lesson acquired may be applied to other civil societies throughout the world and provide some of the most important takeaways from their work. We have Charles Kojo Vendek. Is that?
Van Dyke.
Van Dyke, thank you.
But don't worry.
And you will be leading us and introducing yourself as well as giving a brief presentation of the organization. Take the lead, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you for this invitation. So I'm Charles Kojo Van Dyke. I work, like you said, for the West Africa Civil Society Institute based in Accra. It's a regional organization. The work that I do is to lead the capacity development efforts of the Institute. So I currently head the capacity development unit. So it's my pleasure to speak to you all today. And I came with a colleague, Farouk, who I work with very closely. So I'm happy he could make it.
That's great.
Thank you for inviting me. So so I'll just get into it. I just want to share my screen right now and just share a couple of lessons quite quickly. So let me just share my screen. Yeah, I hope we all can see this.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, so just to say, WACSI, as we call it, I know Debbie was struggling a bit. A lot of people did struggle. Was established in 2005 by the Open Society Initiative for West Africa. Now, the Open Society is like the West African arm of the Open Society Foundations. And currently, the Open Society has kind of conglomerated into Open Society Africa. So they don't have regional offices anymore, but they do exist as an Africa office. WACSI became operational in 2007. So what's our vision? Our vision is a peaceful and prosperous West Africa where development is driven by its people. And our mandate is to strengthen civil society. What we want to do is to make sure civil society is responsive, it's collaborative, it's representative, and it's resilient. And how we do this is through learning, knowledge production, connecting, and influencing. So currently, our strategic objectives, and the exciting part is that we just developed our new strategy, our 2023 to 2027 strategy, and we have 3 clear strategic objectives. One is to strengthen the organizational, technical, and technological capacity of the civil society ecosystem. So not just civil society organizations, but also organic groups, what we call the social movements or informal associations, and then also individuals. So we look at the whole ecosystem and its interactions. We're also focused on nurturing an enabling environment for civil society, recognizing that we do not operate in a vacuum. We actually engage with state actors and other non-state actors, and that influences the way we work. So the legal environment, the governance environment affects the way we work. And then, of course, the third objective is to strengthen our own capacity to deliver on the work that we do. We are basically the vehicle, and the vehicle itself must be strong to deliver. So we are not a thematic organization, and a lot of the times, a lot of people get a bit confused about this. We're not thematic. We work on the ecosystem. So we do our job is more cross-cutting. So we look at issues or themes that affect civil society broadly. So for example, civil society sustainability, that's something that we invest a lot of our resources and time in. How do we strengthen civil society organizations or groups to be able to be effective, to be impactful? How do we strengthen their internal structures? How do we strengthen the way they externally engage with other stakeholders? And so we do a lot of work in that area. And then we do a lot of work in women and youth leadership. How do we prepare the next generation? How do we ensure that we have the civic leaders that are ready to respond to the challenges of our time? And there's a special focus on ensuring that we have a high quota of women in our programs because of just the fact that women are a minority group and the vulnerabilities that women experience in our environment. Then, of course, technology for development, recognizing that technology is a game changer. It affects everything that we do. So how do we help organizations to integrate technology in the work that they do? And not just technology for, using technology, but for helping organizations adapt to technology and to strengthen their operations with technology and to protect themselves. So I'll be talking a lot about digital security, digital resilience as we move along. And then an enabling environment. And that's key because in as much as you strengthen organizations, you strengthen the way they operate, they don't operate alone, they don't operate in a cocoon, they operate in an environment. And so that environment is very important to us, what we call civic space, or the state of civic freedoms, or the governance context, or the relationships that civil society has with both state actors and non-state actors. So all those things, these are things that we work on. So you probably want to know how we go about this. So what are our approaches? So basically, we are strengthening organizations. Everything that we do is to strengthen civil society, but we recognize that there are different ways of going about this. So we do capacity development, which is what people are usually familiar with, training, and then technical assistance. And so we have a lot of training programs that we run, but we also do a lot of mentoring and coaching and what we call shared learning. So that's one of our approaches, but we also do policy influencing and advocacy. So we influence policies that affect civil society broadly. So currently we are influencing donors, we are influencing INGOs to ensure that we have a more equitable and just kind of development environment. We are also influencing issues around civic space, etc. And we do a lot of convening and connecting when it comes to advocacy. And then we also do knowledge management. Knowledge production is extremely important for us, making sure that we are able to capture the contributions of civil society, but not only capture their contributions, but able to disseminate these contributions and able to also produce evidence that supports the work that civil society does. And so this is the work, this is how we strengthen in terms of our approaches. So if it's important for us to understand what context are we working in West Africa right now. So if you look at West Africa, which is a very beautiful region with amazing resources and very youthful region, but it has a lot of challenges. Currently, we are facing rising insecurity, so issues around conflicts, issues around potential terrorist threats and violent extremism. We've had a couple of coups d'etats recently, which is quite worrying. And then, of course, communal conflicts. So there's a lot of insecurity. And then, of course, because of COVID and the challenges with our economies. Many of our economies are going through economic recession. And that's, of course, impacting on the quality of life of people. So if you look at our Human Development Index, you can see that there's been some retrogression on the quality of life in terms of people's ability to access basic amenities and people's ability to also express themselves and assert their freedoms. Then, of course, what we've seen is that there's a decay in governance and democratic practices. So, I mean, we used to have some really exciting democracies. Our democracies were growing, but we've started having challenges. For example, in Mali, we had a coup d'etat, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea. So we've had challenges and a bit of a retrogression in terms of our democratic practice. So this is the environment we find ourselves. So more than ever, civil society is seen as a force for change. More than ever, the citizens are looking at civil society to contribute to responding to some of these challenges or engaging state and non-state actors to make sure that we are in a better place. So there's a greater need for us to strengthen civil society, which makes our mandate quite relevant. So what are the challenges that face civil society? There are several challenges. So currently, if you look at civil society across the region, a lot of the organizations have operational vulnerabilities. So a lot of the organizations, in terms of operations, in terms of governance and leadership structure, they have challenges. They also have technical challenges when it comes to skills and the ability to deliver capacities. We still depend a whole lot of our funding and resources from Europe, from the Americas, and you know, the traditional sources. We still have a situation where we're not able to utilize technology efficiently and effectively to strengthen our operations. So, and there's opportunities there. We have growing restrictions on our civic freedoms. So if you look at many of our countries, there's new laws that are restricting the way we operate. There are attacks on journalists. There are attacks on activists that work on sensitive issues like anti-corruption or the extractives, etc. And so we still have a lot of challenges when it comes to civic freedoms. There's this thing called the Civicus Monitor. If you go there, you'll see that many of our countries are quite obstructed and are kind of retrogressing. So we have huge challenges. Then there's, in the back of all this, there's increasing calls for us as civil society to do things a bit more differently, to connect more with our communities, to be more community-led and demand-driven, to shift the power to communities. And so civil society is being called more to be more accountable and more transparent, but more community-led in the way that we work. So at WACSI, we've tried to respond to some of these challenges. We have a couple of initiatives that we are rolling out. Currently, under our institutional operational kind of body of work, we have work that we are doing with the FCDO and Comic Relief based in UK. And we are looking at strengthening organizations in Ghana that work at the sub-national level. So organizations that work in communities on remote areas. But this work is quite different because we are doing it through a shift the power lens. And so the way we are working with these groups is quite different from the prescriptive way we used to work. Here it's more participatory, it is more community driven. They are actually the ones driving the process and telling us how they want to be strengthened. So it's a very interesting piece of work that we're doing. And the exciting part about that specific project is that it's an 8-year project, so it's long-term. And so we can really take our time to work with these communities to co-create interventions that can really make an amazing impact. And then, for example, we also do some work on philanthropy and social accountability. We recognize that we need to nurture a giving environment. We also recognize that a lot of our people do give. Maybe they don't necessarily give to social justice at this moment, but they give for family reasons. And so how do we get a lot of our folks to give to social justice and development issues? And so we are doing some work on nurturing philanthropy, enabling local philanthropy, and also making sure that we have strong social accountability. So yes, it's good to mobilize money to support our work, to diversify our resources, but it's also good to be able to hold the government accountable within our communities. It's also good to make sure that our citizens are able to participate in ensuring that there's good public service delivery. So we do a lot of capacity strengthening also in these areas. And then, of course, one of the biggest areas we work on is the resourcing and sustainability kind of work. Without resources, civil society cannot be effective. We can't continue to just only depend on traditional sources. So we do a lot of work through the Change the Game Academy on local fundraising, resource diversification, on sustainability. And here, not just financial sustainability, but look at operations, identity, intervention. So a broad and more holistic look at sustainability. And then, of course, we are very much involved in the locally led agenda on conversations on decolonization and shift of power. So we are looking at how do we basically contribute to dismantling the current aid infrastructure, but also not just dismantling it in that sense, but creating a new reality. How do we work through to propose new ways of working within the aid infrastructure? So here we are hosting the Ringo Initiative, which is the reimagining INGO work that we are doing. And it's more of a global piece of work. We work with different actors, both from the Americas and Europe, and from Africa and India, Southeast Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean, etc. And it's a very, very interesting process that we are going through, trying to influence institutional funders and INGOs to do things a bit more differently, so that we have more equitable partnerships and a much more just aid infrastructure. And then, of course, we work also to see how we can expand the civic space. So we have a very interesting project called the Civic Space Resource Hub. And with the Civic Space Resource Hub, we are looking at how do we strengthen organizations to be able to respond to the civic space challenges that they are facing. Now, this is a major challenge. One of the things that organizations are really challenged by is issues around digital security and protection, because we are working virtually and online more than ever. Governance and regulatory compliance because of the laws and the regulations, issues related to anti-money laundering and all these things that have become very difficult issues to navigate. And then, of course, resource mobilization and financial resilience is also part of our civic space work. So these are some examples of how we are responding to those challenges that I elaborated earlier, just some examples of the work that we are doing. But along the way, we've learned some interesting lessons working in this space. One of the lessons that we've learned is it's important to build ownership and meaningful participation. So with everything that we do, we see ourselves as enablers or facilitators. And so for us, it's about bringing everybody with us, leaving no one behind. And so when we design a program, as we co-create the programs from conception, we make sure that we build ownership, make sure that there's meaningful participation of the civil society community, who are our target audience, or the civil society ecosystem. And this has worked for us in terms of us being able to be more effective and clear about the work that we are supposed to do. And then we've also realized that there's a lot of local knowledge that we can tap into. There's a lot of contributions that organizations are making that we can tap into. We recognize this knowledge, we try to integrate this knowledge, but we also create platforms for learning. And we've seen that it's important for us sometimes to pause and reflect and really do a lot more shared learning. And it's from this learning that we take a lot of ideas, a lot of outcomes, and infuse that into our programs. Another thing is that we realized that you can't just focus on organizations in an ecosystem. So you should have an ecosystem approach. The ecosystem is filled with diverse groups. Some are organized, some are legally structured, some are not. You need to work with all of them. They are individuals, they interact. We need to understand those interactions. And so this is how we support. We look at it broadly from an ecosystem perspective. And then the importance of preparing the next generation of civic leaders. Very, very important. Currently, we have about 3 generations within civil society. For the lack of a better description, probably Generation Y or Generation Z, Generation Y, and the young at heart. So you have like 3 different levels and who have grown up in 3 different circumstances, but must coexist and work together. So for us, creating internship opportunities, mentoring opportunities to impact all the young leaders and connect the seasoned leaders with the emerging leaders is something that is working, and we see that it works very well. Then, of course, nurturing resource diversification, really important. One of the things we've seen is that it's important to reduce dependency. It's always good when you have different streams of resources. One of the most important things to do is how we can build the capacity of organizations to mobilize resources from their own constituencies. But not only that, how do we help them to monetize their expertise so they can generate funding and become more sustainable? So these are some of the lessons that we've learned, that resource diversification is key to making the work that civil society does more effective and more sustainable. And it also helps them to be more resilient to overcome the turbulent times that we are in. And then, of course, influencing institutional donors and INGOs, very important piece of work, because we work within an ecosystem that is that influences the work that we do. And so we need to make sure that that ecosystem is enabling. And so we are working to influence the way donors engage with us and the way INGOs, which are a big part of this whole development infrastructure, engage with us in terms of partnerships and collaborations and resourcing issues. And then we are also looking at what's the possibilities of us working with the private sector. This has been, I think, the most challenging, cultivating relationships with the private sector. It's something that for this specific strategy that we've started operating, we'll be looking a bit more deeply into how do we build sustainable relationships? How do we get the private sector to work with us in a more strategic manner and build those relationships? And this, for us, I think this is extremely important, because if you look at most of our economies, if you do an assessment, you realize the private sector has almost 7 times as much resources as the government has. And so there's a lot of opportunities to tap into the resources in the private sector. So yes, we have achieved some milestones. If you look at the work that we've done, we've produced a lot of customized online tools. I can give a lot of examples. We have an alternative funding models. We're part of the TechSoup global platform, so there are tools there. The Change the Game has a lot of tools. We are part of the Learn with Spark platform. So we've been building a lot of online tools through partnerships and even our own initiatives, recognizing that we live not only in an in-person world, but we also live in a virtual world. And it's important to have these resources, not just resources, but resources that are customized and that respond to the challenges that we face in our region. And we are very passionate about that, because we don't want people to say the resources are useful, but we want them to say they are relevant and applicable to the work that they are doing. We found that ourselves always questioning our approaches, strengthening our approaches now. We've reached a point where there's more deeper consultation with our partners on how we work. And so that's becoming part of the way we do things. We've realized that there's power in partnerships. Partnerships have allowed us to extend our reach and influence, and also helped us to be more responsive. So we are now much more savvy in engaging in partnerships, but also recognizing that partnerships also come with its challenges, and developing ways of overcoming those challenges. And the exciting part is that the current strategy that we have, the 2023 to 2027 strategy, gives us more clarity about the specific capacity areas that we need to focus on. So I'll just touch on that quickly. What the strategy is saying is that we need to focus more on enabling learning and innovation through reflection sessions and leverage on models that are kind of like community of practice models that basically congregating and connecting with people and creating spaces for people to learn and share more. We need to invest more in long-term and hybrid capacity strengthening approaches, like I said, not just in person, but virtual capacity strengthening approaches. And then with this strategy, we are focusing more on working with organizations that work on some key thematic issues that are actually influencing our region. For example, climate change, violent extremism, social service provision, gender equality and women empowerment and livelihoods. So organizations that are working in this area, we want to be more intimate and invest more in those organizations. And then, like I said earlier, we're looking at engaging the private sector as a strategy for nurturing local philanthropy. We have a lot of work to do in that area, and increase our investment in technology adoption and adaptation. So this is just like an interesting feedback from some of our programs in Gambia. So this is our local fundraising stuff. Then, we helped these organizations through capacity strengthening. They raised some interesting money. As you can see, it was quite exciting for a country like Gambia, which doesn't have so many resources, but people managed to raise money from within the Gambia and from the diaspora. So this was exciting. As you can see, some raised $40,000, some $13,000, $1,300, $1,000, exciting. These are some pictures from some of our programs and some of our initiatives. Yeah, so a couple of stuff that we're doing and a couple of pictures from our meetings, etc. And our newsletter, our new research report on digital security in West Africa, which is really, really interesting. And yeah, so I'll encourage all of you to get to know more about us. We have a website, WACSI.org, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we are on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Honestly, this was amazing. I think while you were talking and I was like following through, I had this burst of inspiration and admiration as well. That you guys are doing such a phenomenal job, as well as like, this is where I would say that I want my organization for Centre NGO to be, so that we can leverage all our resources for the local organizations, as well as just Haitian-led organizations on the ground. I guess my one question, there was so many, and you actually touched base on each keynote of all the questions that I had, especially with your strategies for 2023 and 2027. The strategies were obviously like well put together. Priority sessions is, to focus more on the share learning, as well as, giving yourself rooms to actually evaluate internally as well as externally, just to see the work that you're doing, the impact that it's doing, and as well as working with like more so like trying to establish and nurture more the relationship with corporate sponsors, because like corporate sponsors, that one is always like a give and take situation. You always have to find the right angle, because most corporations, their intentions sometimes is not well visible to the outside world, and that in itself, like it's admirable, honestly speaking, because just to reach out to a lot of corporations, some of them are very reluctant to even invest into civil societies, or even invest into the infrastructure of their community. I guess my one question for you is, what does philanthropy mean to you personally?
That's a really good question. Actually, for me, from where I sit, I prefer the word giving, because I feel it connects more with what I've seen since I was a kid and our environment. So for me, philanthropy is not just about the raising, whether in kind or cash support for a cause, but it's about mobilizing citizens around responding to a challenge, maybe in a community, right? So it's citizens coming together to help each other to respond to something that means something to them. Now they can, it could be, money could be an important factor, but it also could be non-cash support. It could be the use of their time. It could be expertise, etc. So that's how I see philanthropy, right? And it's this idea that as a community, we have a responsibility to come together and put our resources together to respond to our problems. But beyond that, it's also our responsibility to hold those that we have given responsibility to give us public services to deliver. So I see philanthropy as not just about that, about mobilizing, but I also see it as being socially accountable. So that's how I see philanthropy. Yeah.
I love that. And what pushed you to even get involved with philanthropy?
No, for us it was just the
No, you
realization.
personally,
I mean, personally, no, I
Yes.
think it's just the realization that nobody's going to come and basically change your circumstances for you.
Mhm.
Even if you do get help, there's as far as somebody can go, right? Even if people want to invest in what you're doing or help you, they will not help you beyond a certain limit.
Mhm.
You are the only person who understands what you're going through, and so you must organize yourself to be able to respond to your own issues. So I always believed that it's important to contribute, and one of the things that we are saying is that to change the way we engage with communities, we need to understand that communities already have assets. It may not be money, because of course we are in a world that puts a lot of premium on money, but sometimes they have other assets, they have expertise, they can contribute other things, and we need to recognize that. And so that's why I got into philanthropy, when I got a light bulb moment and realized, wait a minute, there's more, there are more assets than money, and those things should also be factored. Yeah.
And that actually correlates with the project that you're involved with, Shifting the Power.
Yeah, shift of power, yes.
Focusing more on locally led organizations, locally led initiatives, to giving the community the voice to actually make the decision for themselves and apply everything that actually you could say the international organizations really don't have insights on.
Absolutely.
And that is great. I would say like West Africa has a lot of shared similarities to Haiti. Bringing this back to Haiti just a little bit.
Sure.
And the shared similarities like fall into the context of the reality of the country, like the constant civil unrest that is very big in Haiti, as well as the rising insecurity. The economic recession obviously impacts the entire world currently, and as well as the decay in governance and government has been in Haiti for over decades now, as well as like the greater need for change. I know recently, probably last year, we did have like a congressman in the United States basically state that by we, how I understood his statement was more so to say civil society has failed. In your perspective, how would you say, and why would civil society fail in a climate like Haiti, or in a climate that is very much similar to West African countries?
Yeah. So the thing is, if you analyze the trend of civil society's effectiveness, if you look at the countries that are more open, that the government has given more space, there's more civic freedoms, what you realize is that civil society is much stronger in those countries. So if you come from a country where there's an attack on civil society, there's restrictions on people's freedoms, there's poor governance, civil society is also not effective because the environment affects their ability to impact the society. And that's
Agreed.
one thing people don't understand. So for you to say civil society has failed, I think you will have to think deeper about what kind of environment are those organizations operating? Are they enabling or disenabling? Because if the environment is disenabling, it's very, very difficult for civil society to be effective.
Agreed. 1,000% agreed. And I love how you you actually put it together. The words were not coming out.
Yeah.
And with your shared, you could say with your shared lessons learned, what would you apply in the current context of Haiti right now? Like, how would you apply some of the success that WACSI has developed and acquired over the years? Like, how would you apply those same contexts, those same effectiveness to the reality of Haiti?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things before you really can be able to influence things is to understand the context and the state of civil society in Haiti. So there needs to be some sort of evidence or assessment that is done. What is the state of civil society in Haiti? And it's two things you're looking at. You're looking at the external environment. So what is the nature of the civic space in Haiti?
Mm-hmm.
What is the governance context? What is it? And then you look at organizations. How are they operating? How are they structured? What is the organizational culture? So if you do that kind of assessment, it's more like a needs assessment. But not only needs, also do an asset assessment. So what do they have that is great? What some of the opportunities? Then you get a clearer idea of how then you position yourself as an organization to support that ecosystem. If you don't understand the ecosystem, you may just go in there and start prescribing things because maybe you heard somebody from WACSI say something. Yes, because it may work in West Africa, but maybe it's working because we have an appreciation of the ecosystem. Maybe in Haiti, there may be slight differences. There may be some similar things, but there may be slight differences just because of the history of Haiti and other nuances. So it's really doing that basic evidence, gathering that evidence. And interestingly, as you gather that evidence, if you then sit with a representative pool of civil society to co-create a long-term strengthening program, you will notice that from the get-go, you build ownership. The program is relevant for civil society, so they endorse it. And so they endorse the work that you do, and then you bring everybody along. There's no way now that you can do any work and make impact if you are prescriptive. It just doesn't work. Because what happens is that people will just go through the motions with you. They will kind of tolerate what you're saying, but they don't feel a part of the process. So that's what I'll say. I'll say, do a thorough needs assessment and co-create a whole plan, long-term plan, and build ownership with the key organizations that are working in Haiti. Let them be part of it. Yeah.
I'm like, snap to that. Definitely agreed with everything that you said. You also mentioned that you guys that one of your initiative focused on advocacy, more so like, I'm paraphrasing here, lobbying for better policies.
Policies, yes.
Within the ecosystem that actually nurture not only civil societies but INGOs as well. So how do you guys partner with government officials in most of these countries? Because you mentioned before how Mali had like a coup d'etat, and how basically with coup d'etats comes a change of government. How do you guys maintain relationship with governments that are fairly unstable and could ultimately, like, if you establish a relationship with one government and then 3 months later there's a coup d'etat, there's a new one, how do you guys maintain that relationship and nurture that?
No, that's a very tough question because fortunately for me, I've been living in Ghana, which has been relatively stable, even though we are kind of regional and we move about and we have conversations with our colleagues in those countries. The thing about coup d'etats and change of governments is that it creates an unstable situation. It also sometimes creates a situation where some civil society organizations, because of relationships, may be closer to a previous government than the new one,
Mhm.
because they nurtured a certain relationship. And so you then go back again to try and build that relationship. But you see, the thing about governments is that you need to understand how government works. So the government bureaucracy, you need to appreciate how government works. You need to not, get into the partisan conversations. Some of the things you do may be political, because unfortunately, some of the issues we deal with are political in nature. But you must always ensure that you're objective, you're credible, and whatever you put out there has solid evidence. It's your credibility that will get you to engage much deeper with government. Right. And so for me, that is the thing. It's not really about with this government or that government, but if you're credible, you've positioned yourself in a way that you can get respect from government stakeholders, you will get that respect, right? But like I said, you need to really understand government and how government works, not how you wish government works. And that's very, very different. And then of course, as civil society, we need to be very strategic. We need to find allies within government. There are a lot of people in government that support the work that we do, but they can't be overt about it.
That's true.
Because of the positions they find themselves. We need to then tap into these people, leverage on them, because a lot of government people, in many of our countries, they give us calls, they call us. And they'll tell us, oh no, this issue, go and talk. This is what's about. I can send you evidence. I can't say anything. I'm a minister, I can give you, I mean, these things happen. And it's not because they are not bold, but of course, self-preservation. Everybody's thinking about how, he's a minister of state, he's enjoying that position, but he has a bit of a conscience. So, he realizes, look, I'm friends with these civil society guys. I can help, get them information for them to bring some attention to a specific issue, right? So it's about building allies and not necessarily seeing government as enemies. I think that stage of orientation doesn't work.
That's true. It's basically using the government to actually leverage you. That's
exactly
how, like, you create partnership and you nurture these relationships.
Exactly.
Because you are the one who can actually advocate for the initiative. And you said it best on, I believe, the Ringo webinar series. You said a statement that state like advocacy is very evidence-based. You guys are not really activists. So the activism is more going out, I guess for me, in my perspective, the you could say advocacy as well as activism is a slightly different, where advocacy for me is based on the data that you're acquiring data to actually make data-driven decisions to impact and create change versus activism is just more like you make noise, and the noise unfortunately doesn't make any real impact.
No, you see, the thing is, and I keep on giving examples of Black Lives Matter in the States and the issues of police reform and why the comrades out there in African Americans, I have conversations that are so frustrated and saying there's no change. I said, there's one thing putting something on the global agenda. There's another thing getting it changed in the laws, policy, and practice.
Agreed.
It's a very different ball game, right? Because in the end, that is what people use to influence the way they behave. It's the policy, it's the laws. And so there needs to be a lot more attention in building allies within the police service. You cannot change the police service from outside. You need to build champions who will then change it, cause the revolution from inside. So the shouting and the screaming, it's good for optics. It's great to watch on CNN, but you're going nowhere fast.
No one is listening.
Yes, and sometimes when you tell some of the activists this, they don't feel very happy about hearing it, but that's just the truth of the way the world works.
That's true.
If you want to change anything, you need to go inside there, dismantle it, and create a new reality.
Exactly.
And if you're not a member of that police service, they will listen, maybe, okay, but what capacity do they have to change something when the policy has not changed, when the laws have not changed?
It's basically from the concept of
that is it.
A relationship, like in any relationship, if there's ever an argument and you're shouting, the other person is not listening,
No.
And I think like as a community, we must acknowledge the fact that there are other ways that people can actually be involved, in other ways that could actually ultimately create change, rather than, oh, we're only doing this temporarily. That way the world know about our issues. Yes, that's great. But unfortunately, it does not create change the way that we want change.
No.
And
No,
I honestly, I feel like if we continue this route, we would talk for more than 2 hours.
Yeah, no.
But I did not want to hold you back. And I honestly feel that like this was very educational. I took away a lot of information, and I believe like most people who will be watching this will also take away a lot of insights in lessons learned. I think my last question for you is like, are there any recommendations for anyone that will be watching this? Especially, I know that you have a podcast, and it's called
yeah.
Yes.
Alternative Convos. Okay, I didn't know
yeah.
you listened to it. Okay.
I've been an avid listener, but I did not listen to the last episode you put out last week. But overall, it's very like educational, and at the same time, every time I listen to it, I get a burst of inspiration. So I feel like people should hear more about it, obviously.
Okay.
And
Sure. No, I mean, alternative. So it's called Alternative Convos, hosted by Charles Kojo Van Dyke. Yeah. It's on Google, the
Spotify as well.
Spotify, Apple, and a couple of other platforms. So I'll just share the link with you in your LinkedIn. Maybe you can share with the folks. And that the thing is, what I'm trying to do is really to capture specific important issues that affect social change, not only for looking at Africa as a geographic, but looking at Africa as the global Africa, for Africans everywhere, trying to capture our own perspectives on these issues. And giving people an opportunity to articulate sometimes what they really feel about things that they cannot say within an institutional boundaries. Right? Yeah. Basically giving a platform for people to speak their truths, about specific topics. And some of the topics that I do are quite challenging the status quo. I did one on decolonization. Borderless Africa, that sounds crazy for a lot of people. So, but then I also do very skills-based ones. So the recent one that I interviewed, a colleague from Kenya, is on impact measurement, which I thought is important. Yes, it's skills-based, but I think as Africans and as Africa, our agenda it will be important for us to think impact as part of our culture.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that triggers that and triggers the fact that we were doing that, in our communities before this whole MNE was formalized. Our members, our ancestors, they knew what success looked like. You understand? So it's something we're already doing, and it's not really new, but we need to really appreciate the power of that and the power of storytelling. So it was really interesting to speak to colleagues. So I'll be having conversations with and basically documenting history. I call it history because yesterday was history. And documenting different perspectives. And I'm hoping that I get more grace to go on and on and on and on for a very, very, very long time, hoping that this makes an impact for many generations. Yeah.
It is already making an impact. I can speak for myself. It's already making an impact. And I appreciate the work that you do. And I appreciate you taking the time to actually participate in this short webinar. And again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Cheers.
All right, then. Bye.
Bye. Bye.